So, those times when you're just wanting to have an honest conversation with someone and everything is going fine until all of a sudden it isn't. And maybe you just bring up something small, like a need that you have, a gentle boundary you need to set. You're bringing up something that the person may have said that even unintentionally hurt your feelings. And all of a sudden, the person that you're talking to either explodes, completely shuts down, or turns it back on you and tells you why it's all your fault that any of this happened in the first place. And you're left standing there like, what just happened? How did we get from this to this? Did I miss something? If this sounds even remotely familiar, then this talk is for you. Here we're going to unpack 6 things that emotionally immature people do when they're triggered so that you can stop blaming yourself, protect your peace, stay centered no matter whomever or whatever is going on around you, and finally see these patterns for what they are. But first, if you're new here, welcome to our incredible little corner on the internet. Take a second, introduce yourself in the comment section below. If you're back again, always good to have you. My name is Kristina, and I am a registered clinical therapist, a researcher, a coach, a speaker, and the author of my book, Drive Your Own Darn Bus. And I help heart-centered humans think better, feel better, and live better so that they can like themselves and their lives more every day. So if you saw my last video, 7 things that emotionally immature people say that might even sound normal at first, then you know that emotional immaturity can show up in really common everyday conversations and even in ways that might sound polite at first. But in this talk, we're not focusing on what they say. We're focusing on what they do. Those behaviors that show up when someone doesn't know how to effectively or healthily manage their own emotional discomfort. And just to be clear, emotional immaturity doesn't mean that someone is a bad or terrible person. It just means that they have a dysregulated nervous system and haven't yet learned how to regulate their nervous system when they are emotionally activated. They don't know how to stay present in a healthy way when in conflict, and they don't even know oftentimes how to take responsibility when they have hurt or harmed someone, whether intentional or not. So the first thing that emotionally immature people do when they are triggered, they shut down completely. They go quiet. They disconnect. They disappear emotionally. In other words, they stonewall. It literally feels like there is a stone wall in front of them and you can no longer access them. They might say, I feel fine, but you can feel that wall going right up. You know they're not okay, but at that point, they are not willing or maybe even able to give you an opening to be able to work through whatever it is that's come up. This is often referred to as the freeze response. They have literally gone into emotional freeze because their nervous system, their dysregulated nervous system, has gone into overwhelm. And shutting down for them feels safer than engaging. And what we know when someone is having a big emotional response, a dysregulated response to something relatively small that is happening in the moment, it's because they are going back into an old patterned response. Usually a response that they learned or they adapted or they absorbed from their formative years, which aptly, that's when we are forming how we think and feel and react and act in a number of different situations, given the circumstances we are in, the relationships we are in, the things we are going through during those formative years. So understanding when someone is having a disproportionate response in the present to something that just happened, they are not responding to the present moment. They are usually responding to a past pain, a past hurt, a past emotional injury, or a past traumatic experience. But here's the problem. Regardless of the reason why, when someone just shuts down in a conversation, there's no opportunity for repair. There's no opportunity for understanding. There's definitely no opportunity for ownership, and there's no clarity. There's no conversation. There's just silence. And then you're left holding the weight of the tension without knowing what to do with it. But emotional maturity, it means staying present even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's difficult, even when your nervous system is telling you to shut down. Emotional maturity is catching it, breathing and being through it, and grounding yourself in this moment in order to engage, to have a connection, have a conversation, and work through whatever the issue is. The next thing that emotionally immature people do when they're triggered is that they lash out and then often later pretend like nothing happened. Maybe they raise their voice. Maybe they say something cruel. Maybe they say a lot of things that are cruel and they hit below the belt and throw out any kind of mean or nasty or accusatory thing that they can think of in the heat of the moment. And in the next day or in the next interaction, they're fine. They're even maybe cheerful and they're acting like nothing happened. But this isn't resolution. This is avoidance. They don't know how to sit with the discomfort of the rupture, let alone take responsibility for it. So they just blow right past it and act like nothing happened. Well, meanwhile, you're the one still left holding that emotional debris. It's like they knocked over a table, smashed all the dishes, and then invited you over for dinner without even acknowledging the fact that there's a total mess around both of you. Repair requires responsibility, but emotional immaturity skips right over that step. We also know that relationships can endure transgressions. It's not about being perfect in what you say and how you act with your loved ones all the time, and they can endure these transgressions under 3 conditions. They are infrequent, they are acknowledged, and they are repaired. And also, obviously, they're not too severe. But they have to be infrequent, acknowledged, and repaired. And in the absence of that, that is when the more lasting hurt, harm, and damage can add up and really destroy a relationship. So if you are in a relationship or many relationships where the person acts out in ways that throw you off your center, that rattle you emotionally, one of the things that you can do when you can't control them is to stay centered and sturdy yourself. And one thing that's really going to help with that is what I call power thoughts. So these are thoughts that you intentionally bring into your mind that are going to help you stay sturdy and steady and grounded and not get so emotionally reactive or activated yourself in somebody else's lack of emotional regulation. And so using these thoughts with yourself to stay grounded and centered. And I have a list of 25 of my favorite ones that you can get completely free. Just go to the link in the description below and you can get right into those and go through the list and just pull out the few that really connect with you. The next thing that emotionally immature people do when they're triggered is that they make it all about them. So you bring up something that they did that may have hurt your feelings, and then all of a sudden, you're the one who's comforting them. This is something called emotional hijacking, and it's subtle, but it's powerful. And it can look something like this. You come to someone and you say, when you did that, it hurt my feelings, or that really didn't feel fair to me, or that really bothered me, and that kind of just like made me feel bad. And you're trying to tell them how you're feeling. And all of a sudden, they go into how they're feeling. And they say something like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. I'm such a bad person. I can't do anything right. What's wrong with me? I guess I'm just a failure. And all of a sudden, you're trying to make them feel better when you're the one who came to them trying to express a hurt or a frustration or a pain. And now understanding that they're not necessarily trying to be manipulative. It's just that your complaint or your feedback brought big feelings up for them and they didn't know what to do with it. And so they got so caught up in their own feelings that they forgot to pay attention to yours. Or maybe it didn't even occur to them to pay attention to yours because they were so wrapped up in their own. So instead of them being able to hold any space for you, They just have the capacity to hold the space for themselves and their emotions and actually want you to be able to now hold the space for them as well. So really understanding that when someone turns your vulnerability into their crisis, that's not empathy. That's enmeshment. The next thing that emotionally immature people do when they're triggered is they get passive aggressive. They don't actually say that they're upset, but you know that something is off. They give you the cold shoulder. They give you the silent treatment. They say, "I'm fine." They make sarcastic comments. They give the eye roll. They lay the guilt trips. Or they say something hurtful and then laugh it off and say, "Oh, I'm just joking." But why do they do this? Because honesty feels too risky. So their resentment or their hurt leaks out sideways or just goes right around through the back door. But here's the thing. Sideways hostility is still hostility. Passive aggressiveness is still aggressive. It's still someone's attempt to offset their dysregulated emotion and put it onto you. So if something feels kind of off, but you can't exactly put your finger on it, or they say they're joking, but that joke was actually really hurtful, and you can tell by the tone that it actually wasn't just meant as something light and meaningless, don't gaslight yourself into thinking that you're the one who's overreacting or you're the one who's being too sensitive. Trust your gut in those moments. You know when something is off. Because as the saying goes, if something feels off, it means that it probably is. If someone refuses to be honest with you, they don't get to call you too sensitive when the truth comes forward wrapped up in sarcasm. The next thing that emotionally immature people do when they are triggered is that they escalate fast and they react disproportionately. Thinking of it as the punishment doesn't fit the crime. What you said or what you did or how you approach something does not match the reactivity and what they are doing with that in response. You bring up something small, and then all of a sudden, almost even out of nowhere, they flip out. They have a big reaction, and maybe even it turns into a full-blown conflict just like that. And you're left there kind of dazed and confused and wondering what just happened. What did I say that upset them so much? You're confused. You're overwhelmed. And maybe you end up going into fawning, which looks like over-apologizing and putting all the blame on yourself for their disproportionate reaction. So what's actually happening with the person here? They have low distress tolerance, so they can't handle a whole lot of distress, and they have a dysregulated nervous system in that moment, and that results in an emotional explosion, knowing that you didn't cause that. You couldn't have. A disproportionate response like that actually has nothing to do with you. Emotional maturity, when it shows up like this, turns a moment into a full-blown meltdown. Know that your request or your complaint or your feedback was not the problem. Their dysregulated nervous system and inability to manage big emotions is. The next thing that emotionally immature people do when they are triggered is that they double down instead of reflecting. You try to express to them how something hurt your feelings, how something impacted you, and they dig in harder. They get defensive, they start blaming, or they deny everything altogether. Maybe, even, they turn the whole thing back on you. Why? Because for a lot of emotionally immature people, they are struggling with a lot of shame. And so for them, acknowledging that they were wrong makes them feel worthless. They don't think I did something wrong, I better repair it or acknowledge it or try to apologize for it. They don't see it as I did something wrong. Their nervous system reacts in a way that they tell themselves, if I did something that upset someone, then I am something wrong. They go into deep shame, and as a form of self-preservation and self-protection, they lash out. They turn it around. They deny. They blame. This is a self-protective defense mechanism for someone who is likely living in a lot of pain and a lot of shame. And some will even go as far as to double down so hard and not take any responsibility or give any moment for reflection that it will cost them the relationship. Understanding that growth requires humility, that working through shame requires finding a safe way to express vulnerability. And until it goes acknowledged, and until the intention for healing and growth is there, emotional immaturity will always resist the very thing that will set it free. So what do we do with all of this? Well, first, we stop trying to get emotional maturity from someone who just isn't there yet. You cannot make someone become emotionally mature. You can have influence over their emotional maturity by not stooping to your own emotional immaturity when you are feeling triggered, when you are feeling reactive. You can model being sturdy and stable and grounded and not getting mean or nasty or shutting down or shutting out when bigger emotions are happening inside of you. You can practice taking a pause and taking a step back and deciding how you want to respond in a way that is sturdy and steady for you. This doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean just laying down and taking how someone else treats you. It means staying steady and calm and grounded in your assertive communication, in what you say, what you respond to them with, how you act in return. We cannot control anybody else, but we are always in charge of ourselves. And so remembering that in those situations, and it may not change their behavior, but at least it's not allowing them to control or manipulate you or yours. You also don't need to try to contort yourself to avoid ever upsetting them or triggering them. Again, knowing that those triggers are not about you. Yes, someone can be upset by something that you said. Yes, someone can have feelings that come up around something you did, but it's their responsibility to express those things in a mature and responsible and respectful way. And when they're throwing out insults, when they are throwing out blame, when they are hitting below the waist, when they are shutting down and freezing, that is none of those things. And so in those moments, you don't need to be fawning and over-apologizing or over-explaining or trying to get them to see your side, which they might not be able to, or even trying to be right in those moments, because they're probably not open to that either. So instead, you hold your ground, you hold your center, you stay in your own emotional maturity, you stay clear, and you stay steady. So think about it like this. Instead of becoming the thermometer, you become the thermostat. Most of the time, when in big emotionally charged situations, we become the thermometer. We let our temperature rise with somebody else's. But our goal is to be that sturdy, stable person in the room, to be the thermostat, the one that is regulating the temperature. If we can't do it for them, we do it for us. And remember that you're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to have thoughts and feelings and needs and requests, even if someone else hasn't learned how to hold that. And also make sure you grab those 25 power thoughts. Those are going to really help you stay more steady, more grounded, more calm and centered, no matter whomever or whatever is going on outside of you. And let me know, which of these things connected with you? Which of them are you like, that makes sense? I see what's happening there. And this has been my typical response. But now I see some options on how I can do things differently. I can recognize what's happening and I can choose what I want to do with that. I would love to hear thoughts, reflections, insights, what connected, what didn't connect, what created a shift inside of you. What did you get from this talk today? I would love to hear in the comment section below. And until next time, take good care of yourself. Take good care of those around you. Bye for now.